everybody, and welcome to this exclusive conversation with VR expert, co-founder, and CEO of Resolve, Angel. My name is Ursula Jabrez, and I'm the Global Director of Customer Growth for Meta Reality Labs. And I'll be putting the big questions to Angel in just a moment. But before I begin, I just want to take a couple of moments to talk about why we're here. In the last 18 months, there's been a lot of hype about the metaverse, and especially about what it might mean for the future of work. But all of this talk about the future misses an important fact, because there's already technology that is changing the way businesses work today. And that technology is virtual reality. Virtual reality is having a huge impact on companies, how they're approaching creativity and design, helping teams turn bright ideas into best-selling products faster, more efficiently, and working together directly in 3D. Angel is a perfect person to tell us more about this. So let's get into it. Welcome, Angel. So happy to be here with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So tell us how it all started. Tell us about your story and how you got into VR.
Okay. I've been in the VR industry for about a decade now.
Wow.
Got my Oculus Rift DK1 back in 2014. And so that's where my interest in VR started. But where my interest in what I do today, which we'll get to shortly, started was actually when I was an undergrad at Columbia University with my co-founder, Russell. They built a new, spent probably $100 million on a new facility on campus, and then the school newspaper found out that it actually blocked off like a third of the observatory's view of the stars. And so the astronomy department wasn't very happy. My co-founder is huge into astrophotography and astronomy, so he was also pretty disappointed. And that just sparked a lot of conversations at the time about, what is the building process like, right? What kind of conversations happen? And so that planted the seed. I wasn't doing VR at the time. That was 2009. But then fast forward a couple years, I have my DK1. I'm experimenting with it. I'm excited about the tech. And then where it really all took off was at TechCrunch Disrupt, which is a hackathon that happens every year. I built a little prototype of an app to look at buildings and won the hackathon, and then there was no looking back after that.
I love it.
Got into Y Combinator with our company at the time doing architectural VR stuff, and then very recently pivoted into doing Resolve, which is more for using VR for industrial review of facilities.
I love it. So tell us a little bit more about Resolve and the products that you are bringing to the market and the business problems that you're trying to resolve.
Yeah,
I love the name. It's so
it's
appropriate.
a great play on words. Yes, no pun intended. So what we help do is, whenever somebody is building a new facility, in particular industrial ones like water treatment, pharmaceutical manufacturing, data centers, the backbone of a lot of services that society needs. You go through a very complex process to deliver it, and we make sure that you can walk through your building before it's actually built and look for safety issues, accessibility issues, anything that might come up after construction that you're not happy with, and then you need to go back and rip it out of the wall and pay more. I'm talking about these like large projects right now. But if you've ever done a home remodeling or even new home construction, you've probably run into this issue with your general contractor, right? They show you the drawings, you say yes, and then you're walking through the space and you say, wait, why does that look like that?
Right.
And they tell you, oh, it was in the drawings. You signed off on it, right? The problem is, as humans, we're really not everyone is good at thinking in 3D from 2D drawings. And even when you have a 3D model, it takes a lot of work to really project yourself into there and see yourself working there. So that's what our company does, is we build these tools to make sure that people are able to assess their buildings efficiently. That way, once it's built, it can be run as efficiently as possible. It can be delivered efficiently, and nobody gets hurt. And that just means more building of these, important infrastructural services like water, pharma, manufacturing, food and beverage, those sorts of things.
I can imagine that the current costs of issues that need to be fixed is astronomical. Do you have an idea, more or less, what is in the market? What does that look like?
Yeah. So construction's a $13 trillion industry, right? We build a lot around the world.
Yes.
And there's this concept of a rework, which is what I'm describing here, where you have to go out and do something again, right? Do the work over because it was built incorrectly, because it wasn't what you wanted, whatever it might be. And annually, that's $650 billion in waste goes towards rework.
That's insane.
So that's a lot, right?
Yes,
and so we're like, when you think about the scale at which we're building, there's also this stat of just how construction has generally lagged behind manufacturing in terms of efficiency, right? And it's because it is a complex industry. There are a lot of moving parts. There's the designers who design the building up front, and then it changes hands to the general contractor who builds it. Then within the general contractor, there are also trade partners who do the mechanical, the structural work, the fire protection. So many things behind the guts of the building that you don't see that are really important, but it's a lot of different people working on that, and they all have to agree on what is actually getting built, which is a hard thing to do at that scale. And then you also have the actual owner of the building who has their vision for what they want, their requirements for what they want. Everything, the stars have to align to deliver this thing, and a lot of times they don't, right? Things slip through the cracks, and so that's where VR is perfect, because then you're not really leaving things up to ambiguous conversations for you to be imagining the same thing I am. You put on the headset, I put on the headset, and we're walking through a building, and you see what I see, and I can point to something and say, hey, why is that there, right? And you'd be the design expert, let's say, who can answer my question and maybe provide suggestions for what can be done differently.
I love it. And that's a great segue into the next question. I know at Meta, we use Resolve for our data centers.
Yes.
I would love for you to kind of articulate some of the customer examples where you've seen VR and Resolve bring a lot of business value.
Ooh, there's a lot. I think, so we can start a little bit with the Meta data centers. One of the general contractors that we work with is Mortensen Construction, and one of the public stories that we've shared is how there was a single issue that they found on a data center they were working on in DeKalb, Illinois. A single issue saved them around $30,000. And so that's somebody spending maybe 15 minutes in the headset looking up at what was this issue. This was an electrical issue with some conduits. And so what they did was they brought an electrical operator who's an expert in this stuff, has spent years out on site. And so when they're walking through a building, they can recognize these things. It's instinctual to them. They put them in the headset, and this person asked, hey, we can't access those conduits up there. And all it took was shifting them over, adding a little bit more conduit so it can be reached, and then adding a bend. And now suddenly that becomes more accessible. At a data center, there's also the risk of downtime is really important, right? If something happens, well, first, you want to make sure nothing happens.
Yes.
But if something happens, that you can remediate the issue as quickly as possible. And so having access to that electrical conduit, in the event of an emergency could be really important. And so they spotted it, they changed it. The line I like to tell people is they were moving bits before they had to move atoms, right? So
that's right.
It's a lot easier. It's a lot cheaper.
More sustainable.
And more sustainable, yes. Another aspect of what we do is not just saving on the construction costs. When you have to do things over, you have to transport additional materials, right? And there's a carbon footprint associated with the transport, but there's also manufacturing the material. It just contributes to the carbon footprint of these builds. So that was one exciting story on the data centers. Another public story we have is with Bayer pharmaceutical company, and they build these big manufacturing facilities that are lots of machines, right? There's a lot of machinery, there's a lot going on, and so they can use our software to take the 3D models that their general contractors are using for the construction process, and then let the lab operators walk through and say, okay, can I reach for this the way that it's designed, right? Or when I'm going from point A to point B, are there any obstacles that might be unsafe that we should know of? And so they really get to simulate, right, what the operations of the facility would be like in the headset while wearing a Quest, and then flag any potential risks to their design team, to their general contractor, well in advance of the facility going operational.
That's incredible. And I can imagine that once the facility becomes operational, they could use VR also to help with the hard skills, learning and development. And having friends in manufacturing as well, there's always changing environments in a facility. There's machines that need to be moved, there's inventory that needs to be moved, and planning for that can be done with Resolve probably.
Yeah, I guess I can describe a little bit about how the app works. Is we hook up to software that they're already using as part of the design and construction process. And so we're taking these 3D models that they already had, right?
That's great.
We are not making the 3D models for them. They already exist. We just bring them into the headset. And part of the magic of Resolve is that we built this thing called the Wellington engine, which really can render massive, massive buildings all on the Quest without having to connect to a PC or stream from the cloud. Right. And so now you can take these huge models automatically in, let's say, 5 minutes. And so what that opens up the door to is people realizing, hey, we've already invested in this asset. It's called BIM, Building Information Modeling. We've already invested in it for construction. What other use cases are there? And VR and Resolve really open up that surface area of use cases. So right now, we are doing design and construction, but people ask us all the time, very organically, hey, now that I have this digital sandbox of my building,
that's a great way to articulate. Yes,
right? Like I can run safety drills. I can light a fire in a room, and nobody will get hurt. The building won't be damaged. We've had people propose security simulations as well, where they say, hey, there's an incident happening on site. What if we have people in there as avatars, role playing? And again, you don't have to shut down your site to do that. And people can practice as much as they want. That way, when they get to the actual site, they can focus on the actual small details, not taking it in all for the first time.
And they feel familiar with the place that they're going to be working and operating.
There's been actually a couple of customers who have told us that they had only seen their building in VR and Resolve for months before construction happens. And then this was especially common during the pandemic when people couldn't travel to their sites. And then they'd actually go visit, and they'd call us and say, hey, I felt like I'd been there, right?
That's amazing.
I visited this place. I knew the relative layout of the rooms. And now I was there just taking in more the real small details of the equipment or how you exactly open doors, things like that.
I would love to drill a little bit deeper into how do you get started with a business, and first helping them understand where Resolve can solve some of the problems. But also, as you can imagine, many folks may have misconceptions about the ROI of VR. I mean, you just mentioned some incredible examples, but that's probably not something that's top of mind for many leaders. How does Resolve help leaders in beginning that journey, and what would be some of the ROI examples that you can share, or how do you help a business plan that return on investment in this project?
Yeah, I think for a lot of our customers, there is this focus on delivery of the project, right? In construction, budget and schedule are everything, right? You've got to come in under budget if you can, and you've got to deliver the building on time. And one of the challenges is these timelines are shrinking, right? People are wanting to build things faster and faster and faster.
Of course.
Cheaper and cheaper. And so the way we think about, the ROI we provide is, well, set those aggressive deadlines, set the aggressive budget constraints, but use applications like Resolve to make sure that you're not sacrificing quality, right? While you're trying to meet or safety. Because, one of the things that you don't want is to move fast and take shortcuts along the way and then pay the price for it later during when it's OpEx, right? These are CapEx projects that then turn into massive OpEx operations, but sometimes you can mask CapEx savings, and they're going to come up down the line, and these buildings are operational for like 30 years, right? And you don't want to be paying the price for the 30 years. And so go in, take 30 minutes to review your building in VR, and I've already given you some examples where you can have actual savings. We've had people, there was one customer that on their project reported almost 600 issues that they flagged in VR.
Wow.
Now, these range from small nice-to-haves to very large critical issues that they should fix in the, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings. And so just having those 600 issues surfaced kind of acts as this way to make sure, like your last line of defense. Hey, we're going to build this thing. But we've brought these things up. Somebody has seen them. Hopefully somebody has fixed them.
Yes. That is incredible. If you think about the scale of magnitude of the time it would have taken to uncover those 600 issues over a period of time versus in advance of that project being built, that's massive.
Yeah, we have had some folks tell us that they used to spend almost like 20 hours reviewing blueprints or floor plans on drawings, and now they can do like a 30-minute or a 1-hour review in VR and catch even more than what they were doing in those hours, right? So there's not just the ROI of the actual construction cost, there's also the time savings, right? Now those people are freed up to go do more impactful things for their organization, not sit there and like try to look at every line and imagine in their head what they're looking at. They go in, they flag the issues, and then they can get back to more important things.
Right. Well, I can imagine as more customers use your tool, you will have a whole database of issues and you could potentially guide someone. Did you check this? Did you forget to?
Yeah, so you've nailed it. So one fun stat I can share is that, so we launched on the Quest Store in 2022, but we had been in early access since 2020 with Resolve. And since then, over $30 billion in construction projects have already used the application to basically audit their buildings. And you're spot on, right? What we are seeing is people go in and there's the functionality to do like speech to text to flag an issue when you see it. And then we also integrate with all the tools that they use. That way, when you're out of VR, you can track the issues through completion, right?
Right, in your workflow.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
And the cool thing that starts to emerge is you start to see patterns, right? You start to see, hey, you know, in these types of buildings, these are the most common types of patterns. And so in the future, we would certainly love to start to say, well, you don't even have to review, really. We're just going to tell you what might be wrong with the building and then speed that up even more.
That's incredible.
Yeah. There's actually a fun study that I can share is Stanford University and DPR Construction, one of the largest general contractors in the U.S. They've been collaborating on a very cool study where they have been assessing the impact of VR, and they're publishing a paper in the American Society of Civil Engineering. They have a journal on like computing and civil engineering, and the paper focuses on, you know, the construction cost savings of VR.
Yeah.
And what's really cool about the paper is they used a building that was almost identical. It was being built multiple times.
Right.
And so that opens up the door for a very scientific study where you can say, okay, on building 1, we are not using VR. And so that's our control
group, yeah.
And then in building 2, we are going to use VR, and we're going to see how much better we do on building 2. And it turns out you do much better.
Yeah.
Right? They found that there were issues that came up post-construction in building 1, and then they found that exact same issue being called out in VR in building 2
advance.
Before you built it.
That's
right?
great.
And so we're really excited, for once this paper is out, to be able to share the results of the study.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, let us know so we can also promote it.
Absolutely.
That sounds great. As we approach the closing of this interview, which has been fascinating, by the way, you have such a 10-year experience in this field. And I love your personal stories and also the stories with Revolve. What would be some of the insights, the 5 insights that you probably want to share with some of the business leaders listening in today?
The one I always love to share is to make sure you know what problem you're actually solving.
Yes.
Doesn't matter if it's VR, any sort of innovation, initiative, any technology, I think it's really important to know where you're trying to move the needle, right? In our case, it's trying to figure out, okay, what, it varies from project to project, but like, what are you trying to save on, right? Is time the most important thing here? Is it your rework or your, they have other metrics. But generally, I think, especially with VR and AR, it's very easy to get excited about the tech and want to try all the innovative gadgets out there. But then it can also be very overwhelming from an organizational perspective to have everything out there, and then you're not sure what you're measuring, and you just kind of end up having spent a lot on gadgets and nothing to show for it. And I think that's advice also for, if there's anyone watching who's an entrepreneur getting started in the space, it's also important to make sure you know how to get out of, like innovation la la land, where you can kind of be in pilot mode forever. And it's important for leaders or entrepreneurs to know, like, okay, where do we delineate? We've proven out what we wanted from the pilot.
Right.
It's time to scale up, right? We
Yes.
have what we need to now deploy it to everybody. And that's where I think devices like the Quest are so exciting. And with the tech that we've enabled, it's really important that people feel like they can access the tech, right? And I think to leaders, the advice there is also make the tech accessible. Don't put headsets in a conference room that only IT knows how to unlock, right? Make sure everyday people can use it, because they can. One surprising thing to our team has been how some of our most vocal, happy power users actually don't normally engage with a lot of technology, right? They're not spending all day playing video games. First time they use Resolve is the first time they're using like thumbsticks
VR,
and controllers, right? And so, yeah, be open to like anybody at your company being able to pick up and becoming the champion for this type of technology. There's no one right person or like techie person who's going to own this. It might be, a facility maintenance person who has been in the industry for 30 years, but who loves this stuff.
Yeah, I remember watching one of your customer stories about a water filtration organization in the UK, and how they gave the devices to some of their employees who've never, ever used VR. And like you said, they're not really tech savvy. And they were able to be walked through the experience, and immediately what they mentioned, which I thought was really interesting, is that not only were they just participating in the meeting and the review, but they were more curious to explore and discover new things that before perchance would not have had the opportunity to do so, because they were just focused on the meeting objective, right? But this, because it's new to them, it creates this sense of awe and like, let's see what else is in here.
Yeah, and I think that, for business leaders, that's what you want. You want people to be engaged with what you're doing. And I think, post-pandemic with so many Zooms, it's really easy to just like tune out a Zoom meeting and check your email, do something else on the side. But when you're in VR, you have to be, your attention is on the screen that's in front of you, or really the world that's in front of you. And with that particular example, one of the interesting things is also the way these traditional meetings work is you will have like 20 or 30 people on a screen share, while one person is the one flying through the model on a 2D screen. And so it's really easy to tune out, because if they're not zooming in on what you care about, you're wasting your time there, right? And now you're wasting your time times 30 people. That's expensive for the org.
That is expensive.
Now you throw Resolve and VR into the mix, and anyone can go up to any element that they're interested in from the perspective that makes sense to them, and then ask a question, right? They're not subject to what the one expert in 3D is looking at and flying around with. And I just think that's huge for efficiency, right?
That's
you free
powerful.
up 30 people to go do what they need to do, and then meeting over.
Yes, I wish all meetings are like that from now on.
Right.
And what would be additional insights that you'd like to share with the audience?
About
your experience, you mentioned, to focus on solving the problem. And I know we talked about not being intimidated by the technology, or focus just on the gimmicks of the technology as well, right?
I think the other one is also have a roadmap, right? For like where you want, if it works, like where do you want it to go? I think a lot of people, it's easy to start with, let's say, 5 headsets.
Right.
But then how do you make the jump from 5 to 100 headsets? Right. Like, what does that look like? And what things are you thinking about? How are you managing the devices? Who's getting them first? And then how do you go from 100 to 1,000? And while you're doing that, also think about how the impact scales with your deployment, right? Because it's not just, we're buying more headsets. It also means more people are using this stuff. We're saving more. And I think with that also comes the challenge of how do you standardize it at your org, right? What are new procedures that you have to put into place? What are possibly new skills that people need to learn to use this stuff? But all that stuff shouldn't deter people from getting started.
I see that as an opportunity, right?
Exactly. You can solve that once you have 10 happy people at your company using VR, then you go to 100, and then you go to 1,000, and it all kind of plays out very organically.
Yeah, I've yet to see anyone put a headset on and not smile. So imagine just by the sheer act of putting a headset in one of all your employees' heads, you will have engaged employees and uncovering kind of the new use cases that you can get benefit from.
I have a fun story there. One of our customers that builds data centers in Europe, the way that they started using Resolve is actually their entire Switzerland office was gifted Quest 2s as a holiday gift from the company.
Yeah.
So they all had them. The intent was just, hey, here's this device, right? Go explore the store, go play games. It's an entertainment device. But then one of them came to downloaded our app on the store and then reached out to us and say, hey, we have these devices.
Yeah.
Can I see my buildings in there? Yes, you can. And now everybody had one already.
That's incredible.
And they all already loved the headset because they'd been using it for non-work things. And then the transition was so organic there where everybody had one. And to your point, they'd all been enjoying it, and now they could use it for work and play.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love it. So this is the final question, and the one that I love because there's no wrong answer. And it's, if you had a crystal ball, where do you think VR for work will be in 2 years, in 5 years, and in 10 years from now?
Oh, that's a great question. I think my hope for the trajectory is that it becomes a lot more personalized, right? I think, and accessible. I think that probably sits hopefully somewhere between 2 and 5 years where people will have their own devices that they can use for a number of apps, right? Not just a single app. They are using it to do traditional workflows, and then when it makes sense, transitioning into immersive workflows, and then vice versa, and then going home and also using it as an entertainment device, and it becomes, part of the part of your everyday, right? Like our computers, like our phones, and we don't really think about it as, oh, I'm going into VR, but just I'm working, right? Like I'm going to work, and I think it just continues to play out that way in the long term, that these devices sort of become invisible, so to speak, right? That they're always there, and we stop really thinking about them as
probably lighter and smaller.
Yes,
more ergonomic.
So. Exactly, and it just becomes like the tools that we have today, right? Where you don't really think about the fact that now you have a smartwatch, right? It's just my watch, right? Or smartphone. It's just my phone that is really powerful. So I think that's where this stuff is going. The tech is only going to get, to your point, more comfortable, but also more powerful, and we'll be spending more time in it doing some of the stuff that we already do on our computers, but then also some of the more immersive content.
I love it. It's a great vision. Well, I can't believe how quickly the time has gone, but I'm afraid that that's all the time we've got for today. A big thank you to Angel for sharing so many great insights into the impact that VR is having in businesses today and where it can go into the future. And thank you and everyone who's taken the time to listen in. I hope that we've left you feeling inspired and also curious. If you want to know more about VR for work, just head over to our website, forwork.meta.com, where you can check out a range of MetaQuest VR headsets and learn more about VR solutions or easily book a call with one of our experts. And if you want to learn more about Resolve, which I highly recommend, just head to Resolve BIM, and that's Resolve, like it's spelled here, BIM.com. That's all from us. See you next time.